When the lawmaker agreed to appear on the broadcast, he significantly underestimated the tactical depth of his opponent. He did not fully grasp that he was stepping into an arena with a former federal agent trained in the meticulous dissection of security protocols. The network had curated this high-stakes segment to address unresolved friction regarding the origins of the inquiry into foreign election interference. The fundamental conflict was stark, pitting a legislator who championed the collusion narrative against a critic who viewed the probe as a partisan maneuver. While the congressman relied on his tenure in the Capitol, he failed to anticipate that his legislative resume would not shield him from a forensic dismantling of his past statements. The commentator accepted the engagement because he had spent years assembling a comprehensive dossier on the matter. His preparation mirrored the intensity of a criminal investigator revisiting a dormant case file, aggregating details that others had overlooked. This process involved a rigorous analysis of declassified government releases and the cross-referencing of numerous public record requests. He meticulously examined accounts from intelligence personnel who contended that the prevailing media story diverged significantly from the raw data. By comparing official oversight conclusions against televised interviews, he identified specific contradictions that had gone largely unchallenged in the press. Collaborating with a research team, he constructed precise timelines that linked classified briefings to subsequent unauthorized disclosures. The evidence was systematically categorized into distinct binders covering the initial opposition research, surveillance applications, and information handling. Every section featured highlighted passages and visual aids designed for immediate and impactful presentation to the television audience. Beyond the physical compilation of data, he had mentally simulated the exchange to ensure his arguments remained disciplined and fact-based. His objective was to bypass emotional rhetoric and force a confrontation based strictly on the documented chronology of events. Prior to airtime, he vetted his strategy with legal experts to confirm his assertions were anchored in released federal reports. For the former agent, this debate transcended mere political theater, representing a continued obligation to the principles of national security. He viewed his oath to the Constitution as a lifetime commitment, recalling the strict operational security demanded during his service. It was his conviction that the representative had not exercised the necessary caution required when handling sensitive intelligence capabilities. Consequently, the evening was positioned not just as a debate, but as a demand for accountability regarding conduct and policy adherence. The challenger arrived at the venue prepared to deliver a structured critique rooted in official government findings. The segment was engineered to pressure the official on the disparity between his early claims and the final conclusions of the special counsel. Inside the New York studio, the atmosphere was electric, with a capacity audience waiting in palpable anticipation. The stage was configured for a rigorous examination, featuring monitors ready to broadcast the cited documents directly to viewers. The congressman entered first, projecting the practiced calm and professional demeanor expected of a senior Washington figure. He had briefly reviewed the justifications originally utilized to launch the counterintelligence probe before taking his seat. Moments later, the commentator entered to a thunderous reception that forced the moderator to call for order. Clad in his signature attire, he dropped his substantial binders onto the desk with a heavy resonance that signaled his intent. He fixed his counterpart with an unwavering stare, before nodding to the crowd to indicate his readiness for the exchange. The host opened the broadcast with a plea for civil discourse, a request that seemed optimistic given the evident friction. The lawmaker commenced with a polished statement regarding the gravity of foreign meddling and the necessity of his committee's work. He defended the rigorous nature of the oversight process while suggesting his opponent misunderstood the nuances of intelligence analysis. Cutting through the preamble, the commentator interjected to shift the focus immediately to the specific allegations of coordination. He reached for his first binder, noting that the dynamic of the conversation shifts when hard records are introduced. With a sharp tone, he insisted they bypass generalities to address the existence of concrete evidence. He produced a transcript from a previous interview where the representative had claimed to possess ample evidence supporting the collusion theory. He demanded a direct confirmation as to whether those specific assertions were made to the American public at that time. When the official attempted to contextualize the remarks, the challenger persisted until the historical record was affirmed. A video montage was then cued, displaying a pattern of similar definitive statements made across various networks over several years. He pointed out the stark contrast between the certainty expressed then and the subsequent investigation, which concluded without establishing a conspiracy. The challenger cited the exact language of the special counsel's report, which stated, "The inquiry did not establish a conspiracy with the foreign power." He read the conclusion with deliberate emphasis, highlighting the chasm between the official findings and the lawmaker's prior confidence. Turning to the congressman, he asked for the location of the concealed evidence that supposedly contradicted the federal investigation. When the response drifted toward the topic of obstruction, the commentator forcefully steered the debate back to the primary allegation of coordination. He reiterated that the most exhaustive inquiry in recent history had failed to substantiate the central charge the lawmaker had promoted. He then introduced documents regarding the opposition research file, characterizing it as unverified raw data utilized within the legal process. He questioned the ethical implications of relying on a dossier financed by political adversaries during an active campaign. The congressman's composure faltered slightly as the challenger detailed the significant errors identified by the Inspector General regarding warrant applications. It was argued that the prevailing narrative had been sustained by a document that federal agencies were largely unable to corroborate. He contended that the electorate had been misled for years due to a systemic lack of accountability regarding these procedural failures. The audience reacted audibly as the second binder was opened to reveal the financial trails behind the research origins. He pressed the lawmaker to acknowledge that this partisan material played a pivotal role in securing surveillance authority against a campaign advisor. Records were displayed tracing the funding from the political campaign through legal intermediaries to the firm that compiled the reports. He argued that the material was repackaged as neutral intelligence when it was, in reality, a product of paid political opposition. He showcased official findings, indicating that the Bureau struggled to verify the substantive allegations contained within the file. Footage was shown of the representative defending the integrity of the warrant process despite emerging questions regarding source reliability. The challenger highlighted instances of procedural misconduct, noting that a federal attorney had altered a document regarding the advisor's status. He asked why the congressman continued to validate the surveillance decisions even after being briefed on these significant discrepancies. Listing the omissions cited in the oversight report, he framed them as serious institutional failures rather than mere administrative oversights. He suggested that the oversight function was exploited to advance a political narrative rather than to ensure strict legal compliance. Transitioning to the third section, the debate focused on the unauthorized release of sensitive information to the press. He established that the committee leadership held unique access to classified briefings that were protected by federal law. A timeline was presented illustrating the suspicious proximity between closed-door sessions and the subsequent appearance of related stories in the media. He observed that specific details frequently emerged in news reports shortly after sensitive briefings were concluded. A graphic was displayed suggesting a consistent pattern of communication between committee staff and reporters during critical moments. He argued that the released information was often curated selectively to damage opponents while exculpatory context was withheld. Drawing upon his professional experience, the commentator explained that such precise leaks typically originate from individuals with high-level clearance. He read transcripts of witness interviews where officials stated privately that they had seen no empirical evidence of collusion. These private admissions were contrasted sharply with the public alarms sounded by the congressman during the exact same time frame. He concluded this segment by characterizing the tactical release of classified data as a fundamental betrayal of the public trust. The discussion then shifted to the election season and the media reporting surrounding the controversial laptop hardware. He reminded the lawmaker of the public statement signed by former intelligence officials that framed the story as a foreign operation. A clip was played of the congressman citing that specific letter to cast doubt on the report's validity during the debate. Documents were presented indicating the Federal Bureau was in possession of the device and had assessed its contents prior to those dismissals. He argued that the authority of the intelligence community was leveraged to influence voter perception by mislabeling the story. He accused the representative of ignoring verified information to protect a preferred political outcome during the electoral process. The commentator then raised the issue of a committee member's past association with a suspected foreign intelligence operative. He questioned the judgment involved in permitting a member with such a compromised connection to retain a seat on the sensitive panel. This situation was contrasted with the aggressive treatment of members from the opposing party, who faced discipline for their statements. He argued that overlooking a security concern involving a colleague while investigating others demonstrated a clear double standard. He produced his final file regarding the Select Committee on the January events, criticizing the methodological approach of the inquiry. He cited disputes regarding the preservation of certain data and testimony for future review by the incoming legislative body. He argued that the failure to archive every piece of material raised legitimate questions about transparency and historical accuracy. He claimed the presentation of video evidence was curated to construct a specific narrative while omitting broader context. He concluded that the committee's work appeared to be more of a political production than a neutral fact-finding mission. As the program approached its conclusion, the challenger stood to deliver a comprehensive summary of his case against the congressman. He referenced his own enduring commitment to the law, contrasting it with what he described as the lawmaker's investigatory overreach. He recapped the night's pivotal topics, including the investigation findings, the research dossier, the surveillance irregularities, and the leaks. He declared that the intelligence apparatus had been dragged into the political arena, resulting in significant damage to its reputation. He pointed to his files as the documentation proving that political objectives had superseded the impartial search for truth. He finished by asserting that utilizing government resources against citizens posed a danger to the democratic process. The audience responded with applause as the congressman remained quiet, choosing not to engage further with the specific timeline. The clips from the exchange circulated widely online, generating significant engagement across social media platforms. Supporters of the commentator viewed the performance as a decisive victory, while other observers acknowledged the validity of the documents regarding the dossier. The event influenced public discussion, with opinion polls reflecting a notable divide in how the congressman was subsequently perceived. Legal analysts debated the seriousness of the surveillance irregularities and the leak allegations brought up during the broadcast. The confrontation brought renewed attention to the reporting on the laptop and the role of former officials in the public debate. The congressman faced continued scrutiny, but eventually announced his campaign for the Senate, moving on from the lower chamber. The commentator's influence continued to grow, having solidified his reputation as a formidable debater on the national stage. The exchange demonstrated that established narratives could be effectively challenged when confronted with organized documentation and records.